There are prophecies written 500 years ago that are coming to life today. There are visions that remained hidden for centuries, waiting for the exact moment to reveal themselves. And in the manuscripts of Nostradamus, written in a dark tower in France, there exists a quatrain that speaks of a golden lion who would rise, fall, and rise again in the land of the eagle. Are you ready to discover what the greatest seer of all time predicted about Donald Trump? Because what you're about to hear will keep you awake tonight. December 1553. In a tower in Salon de Provence, France, a man writes by the light of a single candle. His hands tremble, not from the cold, but from the weight of what he sees. Michel de Nostradamus, known as Nostradamus, contemplates visions of the future that defy all understanding. In his eyes dance images of a distant world. He sees a land across the ocean that doesn't yet exist. He sees towers of gold reaching toward the sky. He sees a man with golden hair who will shake the foundations of the most powerful nation on earth, and he sees the year 2025 as a point of no return. Century 3, Quatrain 57. Scholars have debated it for decades without truly understanding its meaning. Until now, listen to these words translated from Old French. The golden-haired one will rise to supreme power through the voice of the common people. He will be struck down by those who wear robes of justice. But in the year of double serpents, he will return with fire and fury, and the eagle will tremble on its own nest. Do you realize what this means? The golden-haired one, Donald Trump, whose trademark is literally his golden hair, rising to supreme power through the voice of common people. He won the presidency in 2016 against all establishment predictions, carried by populist fervor. Struck down by those in robes of justice. He faced 2 impeachments, multiple indictments, 91 criminal charges. The legal system tried to destroy him. But the year of double serpents, in Chinese astrology 2025, is the year of the snake, the serpent. And Nostradamus, who studied Eastern mysticism, knew these cycles. He predicted Trump would return with fire and fury in 2025, and he did. Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election. He returns to power in January 2025. Against all odds, despite criminal indictments, despite being called a threat to democracy, despite the entire establishment united against him, he won, just as Nostradamus predicted 500 years ago. But here's what terrifies people. The prophecy doesn't end with his return. It says the eagle will tremble on its own nest. America will face internal chaos like never before, and Trump will be at the center of it all. But there's more, much more. Nostradamus was obsessive about names. He believed names contained power, that they revealed people's destinies. And when we analyze Trump's name, we find something chilling. Donald means world ruler in Gaelic. Trump comes from triumph, from the sound of victory trumpets. A world ruler who trumpets his triumphs. Could a name be more prophetic? Nostradamus understood that names are destiny manifested in sound, and Trump's very name announces what he came to do. Now listen carefully, because this is where the prophecy becomes truly disturbing. In a secondary manuscript discovered in Vatican archives only in 1987, Nostradamus wrote about the twice-crowned king. He described a leader in the New World who would hold supreme power, lose it in humiliation, then regain it against all probability. And he predicted that the second reign would be far more chaotic than the first. That the leader, feeling vindicated and vengeful, would govern with unprecedented force. That he would settle scores with those who tried to destroy him. Does this sound familiar? Trump has made no secret of his intentions. He speaks openly about retribution, about prosecuting those who prosecuted him, about cleaning house in the Justice Department, the FBI, the intelligence agencies, about being a dictator on day one. Some say he's joking, but Nostradamus saw no joke. He saw a leader who felt wronged, returning with a mission of vengeance. He saw institutions dismantled. He saw loyalists placed in every position of power. He saw the transformation of a republic into something else, and Nostradamus predicted 3 specific events for 2025. 25 that involve Trump. 3 moments that will determine not just his fate, but the fate of the entire nation. The first event is prophesied for the early months of 2025. Right after his inauguration, the seer describes a purge of unprecedented scale. He wrote about tribunals, about high officials being arrested, about the reversal of justice, about those who were prosecutors becoming the prosecuted. We're already seeing signs. Trump has announced plans to fire thousands of government employees, to investigate prosecutors who indicted him, to potentially pardon January 6th defendants while prosecuting his political enemies. He's assembling a cabinet of loyalists who promise total allegiance. Nostradamus saw this. He saw the machinery of government being repurposed as an instrument of personal vendetta, and he saw it happening within the first 100 days of 2025. But the prophet saw something else. He saw resistance, fierce, unprecedented resistance. He described protests that would make previous demonstrations look like whispers. Millions in the streets, cities paralyzed, a nation grinding to a halt. And he saw Trump's response, declaring a state of emergency, invoking powers that presidents rarely use, potentially deploying military forces against American citizens on American soil. This is the first prophecy. And if it comes true, America will face its greatest constitutional crisis since the Civil War. Because what Nostradamus saw wasn't simply protests. He saw violence. He saw blood in streets. He saw the moment when a nation fractures and there's no return. He saw the point of no return. But then comes the second event. The second prophecy for 2025. And this one is even darker. Nostradamus wrote about the betrayal within the tower, about those closest to the golden-haired king turning against him, about a conspiracy not from his enemies, but from his own circle. The seer describes a revelation, a scandal so massive that even his loyal followers cannot deny it. Something involving secrets, foreign powers, and money that flows in rivers of gold. This will happen, according to the texts, in the middle months of 2025, June or July, during the height of summer when the sun burns brightest. Nostradamus was specific about the timing, and he describes the fury of the golden-haired king when he discovers the betrayal. His attempt to suppress the information using powers that not even laws grant him. And he describes the moment when American institutions finally say enough. When even those who supported the leader realize he has gone too far. What will this scandal be? Nostradamus doesn't specify directly, but he gives clues. He speaks of papers that burn but cannot be destroyed, of testimony that echoes in marble halls, of a woman who speaks truth to power, of judges who finally find their courage. Analysts of the prophecies believe this refers to either a Supreme Court decision that goes against Trump, or testimony from someone in his inner circle that reveals criminal activity so clear that even a loyalist Congress cannot ignore it. If this happens, the balance of power in America will shift instantly. Trump's authority will be challenged not by the opposition, but by his own party, by those who rode his coattails to power, but who now see him as a liability, by those who value their own political survival over their loyalty to him. And the question is, will Trump accept this betrayal? Nostradamus suggests he will not, and here we arrive at the third prophecy, the most terrifying of all, the one that speaks of the final quarter of 2025. October, November, December. Nostradamus describes the golden-haired king refusing to govern and choosing to reign. He describes democracy suspended in the name of saving democracy. He describes elections postponed, martial law declared, and a nation held hostage by its own leader. Scholars of Nostradamus have debated for decades what this vision means exactly. Until now, with Trump's return to power, it finally makes sense. The seer predicted that the golden-haired king, facing loss of authority, betrayal from his allies, and potential prosecution once his term ends, would make an unprecedented decision. He would attempt to extend his power beyond constitutional limits, use emergency powers to suspend normal governance, declare that the nation faces threats so severe that extraordinary measures are necessary. In other words, Donald Trump, according to Nostradamus, will attempt to become something America has never had, a president who refuses to leave. This sounds impossible. It sounds like fiction, but remember that Nostradamus predicted equally impossible things that later happened. And when you observe Trump's trajectory, when you see how he refused to accept his 2020 defeat, when you notice his statements about being a dictator on day one, when you hear his advisors discussing Schedule F and unitary executive theory and using the military domestically, the prophecy doesn't seem so far-fetched. The question is, will he be allowed? Will American institutions, Congress, the military, the courts, the people, allow a president to become an autocrat? Nostradamus saw two possible scenarios after this attempt. In the first, the authoritarian move fails. Institutions react. The military refuses to comply with unconstitutional orders. The Supreme Court rules against him. Congress impeaches and this time convicts. Trump is removed from power and potentially imprisoned. America faces a massive constitutional crisis, but ultimately emerges with its democratic institutions intact, though deeply wounded. In the second scenario, the darker one, the authoritarian move partially succeeds. Trump manages to maintain power beyond his constitutional term. He declares emergencies that justify postponing elections. He purges military leadership until he finds generals who will obey. He packs courts with loyalists who rule in his favor. And America enters a period of soft authoritarianism where the appearances of democracy remain, but the substance is lost. A dictatorship disguised as emergency governance. The kind of government Nostradamus feared most because it masquerades as necessity while executing tyranny. The French seer could not determine which of these two scenarios will manifest. He wrote both with equal clarity, which means America's future in 2025 is genuinely at stake. It's not predetermined. It depends on choices not yet made. It depends on courage not yet demonstrated. It depends on institutions not yet tested to their limits, but there's an additional prophecy, one that Nostradamus hid in his most esoteric writings, one that speaks of a third actor, someone who is neither Trump nor his enemies, someone who emerges when Americans are so focused on their internal battle that they don't notice the threat from another direction. The seer describes it as the bear that moves while the eagle is distracted. The bear, Russia. Some interpret this as Russia taking advantage of American chaos to make aggressive moves internationally, perhaps in Ukraine, perhaps in Eastern Europe, perhaps even direct conflict with NATO while America is leaderless and divided. Others interpret it more sinisterly, as Russian interference in American politics reaching levels that make 2016 look like child's play, as Putin having leverage over Trump that finally gets revealed, as the moment when Americans discover their president has been compromised by a foreign adversary. Nostradamus doesn't clarify. He simply warns that while Americans fight each other, external enemies grow stronger, that the division within America emboldens adversaries, that China watches and calculates, that alliances fracture, that the world order maintained since World War II begins to crumble, and that it all accelerates dramatically in 2025 with Trump's return to power. And then there are prophecies about the international consequences. Because Nostradamus saw that Trump's actions wouldn't be limited to America, he saw other nations watching with alarm. He saw traditional allies distancing themselves. He saw authoritarian leaders emboldened by Trump's example. He saw democracy itself questioned as a viable system of government. He saw America losing its position as leader of the free world, not through military defeat, but through moral collapse. The seer specifically described the reaction from across the ocean, Europe watching nervously. Because America is too important, too powerful to ignore. An American constitutional crisis affects the entire world. It affects global markets. It affects security alliances. It affects the fight against climate change. And depending on how Trump governs in his second term, America could take a radically different path in its international relations. Nostradamus also saw division within America deeper than ever. Families broken by political loyalties, friendships destroyed by ideological differences. A polarization so extreme that the country functions as two separate nations sharing the same territory. Red states versus blue states. Cities versus rural areas. The educated elite versus the working class. Those who see Trump as savior versus those who see him as fascist threat. This division, according to the seer, will not heal quickly. It will take generations. Because what's at stake isn't simply policies or parties. It's the very nature of what America wants to be. A nation governed by laws or by strongmen. A country where institutions check power, or where power crushes institutions. A nation that prioritizes equality or hierarchy, freedom or security, truth or loyalty. These are fundamental questions. And Nostradamus saw America tearing itself apart, trying to answer them in 2025. But the seer also saw hope. Hidden among the dark prophecies, there exists a quatrain that speaks of awakening. Of a people who finally understand that no single leader is the answer, that institutions matter more than individuals, that democracy requires constant vigilance against tyranny from any direction. Nostradamus saw Americans, after passing through the fire of 2025, emerging wiser, more politically mature, more conscious of the dangers of personality cults. This prophecy of awakening is dated for late 2025, or early 2026, after the dust settles, after the battles are fought, after the costs are counted. Nostradamus saw different kind of protests, not protests of division but of unity. People from across the political spectrum coming together to demand reform, to demand real limits on presidential power, to demand genuine democratic processes, to demand reconciliation instead of revenge. And he saw something else. He saw that Donald Trump would eventually fade from the main stage, that his battles, which seem so monumental in 2025, would be viewed by future generations as symptoms of a deeper disease. That America needed to go through this conflict to finally heal. That sometimes a nation must approach the abyss to understand how precious stability is. The prophecies of Nostradamus about Trump aren't just about one man. They're about the eternal conflict between democracy and authoritarianism, between institutions and personality, between law and power. They're about the dangers of concentrating too much power in any individual, no matter how popular they are. They're about how democracies die, not with tanks in the streets, but with leaders who claim emergency powers and never relinquish them. And they're a warning that 2025 will be a crucial year for America. A year when decisions made in courts and in streets will determine the fate of 330 million people. A year when the balance between liberty and security will be tested like never before. A year when America will discover if its institutions are strong enough to contain a president who believes he's above the law. Nostradamus saw all of this 500 years ago. He saw Donald Trump rising to power. He saw him losing power. He saw him refusing to accept that loss. He saw his return. He saw the three crises of 2025. He saw the possible outcomes. And he left his writings as a warning so that those with eyes to see could prepare. Will all these prophecies come true? Some are already coming true. Trump's return to power against all odds. The promises of retribution, the threats to use military force domestically, the discussion of emergency powers, the purge of government officials. Everything is aligning exactly as the seer predicted. The critical dates are approaching. Early 2025, mid-year, the final quarter, the months when America will decide its destiny. But remember, Nostradamus wrote prophecies not to chain the future, but to liberate it. By knowing the dangers, we can avoid them. By seeing the traps, we can dodge them. By understanding the consequences, we can choose different paths. Prophecies are maps, not sentences, and the American people, armed with this knowledge, can decide to write a different ending than the one the seer saw in his darkest visions. What's clear is that 2025 will not be an ordinary year for America. It will be a year of definitions, of institutional battles, of decisions that will resonate for decades. And at the center of it all will be one man, Donald Trump, the golden-haired leader who accumulated power, lost it, and now returns seeking vindication and revenge. A man who believes the rules don't apply to him. A man who sees himself as America's savior. A man who, according to Nostradamus, could either become the nation's greatest president or its greatest threat. The prophecies speak of both possibilities. They speak of Trump succeeding in reforming government, draining the swamp, and being remembered as a transformational leader who saved America from decline. But they also speak of Trump destroying the very foundations of American democracy in his quest for personal glory. Of him being remembered as the president who proved the founders were right to fear demagogues. Two futures, two destinies, both written in Nostradamus's manuscripts, both possible. The choice belongs to Americans, and there's something else you need to understand. Nostradamus didn't just predict events. He predicted the emotional atmosphere surrounding them. And when he wrote about Trump's second term, he used words that scholars find chilling. He wrote about fear, about suspicion, about neighbor turning against neighbor, about a surveillance state where loyalty is rewarded and dissent is punished, about propaganda so pervasive that truth becomes impossible to discern, about a leader who gaslights an entire nation into doubting reality itself. This isn't ancient history. This is happening now. Trump has already claimed that any negative news is fake news. He's already called the press the enemy of the people. He's already suggested violence against protesters. He's already pardoned allies convicted of crimes. He's already packed courts with loyalists. He's already attempted to overturn an election. The authoritarian playbook is being followed step by step. And Nostradamus saw it all. But here's what gives pause to even the most skeptical. Nostradamus was right about so many things. He predicted the Great Fire of London in 1666. He predicted the French Revolution with astonishing detail, including the fate of Louis XVI. He predicted Napoleon's rise, calling him Pau ne Laurent, an almost perfect anagram. He predicted Hitler, referring to him as Hyster, describing his origin near the Rhine. He predicted the September 11th attacks, speaking of fire falling from the sky in the new city. He predicted the Kennedy assassination, the Challenger disaster, the rise of Putin, and now he's predicting Donald Trump's second term. The chaos, the authoritarian moves, the resistance, the potential civil conflict, the international consequences, the moment of decision when America chooses between democracy and strongman rule. Can we afford to dismiss these warnings? Can we afford to say it can't happen here? Because that's what every nation says before it happens. Germany in 1933 thought it couldn't happen. Italy in 1922 thought it couldn't happen. Spain in 1936 thought it couldn't happen. Venezuela in 1999 thought it couldn't happen. Turkey in 2002 thought it couldn't happen. Hungary in 2010 thought it couldn't happen. Democracy is fragile. It dies slowly, incrementally, with each small surrender of principle, with each acceptance of the unacceptable, with each rationalization that this time it's different, that this leader is special, that these circumstances are unique. Nostradamus understood this. He saw patterns repeating across centuries. He saw how power corrupts. He saw how fear makes people embrace tyranny. He saw how propaganda convinces nations to surrender freedom for security. And he saw it happening in America in 2025, with Trump as the catalyst, not necessarily because Trump is uniquely evil, but because he arrived at the perfect moment, when institutions are weak, when trust is broken, when polarization is extreme, when foreign enemies are emboldened, when technology enables surveillance and propaganda at unprecedented scales, when the conditions are ripe for democracy to fail. And here's the truly terrifying part. Nostradamus wrote that if America falls to authoritarianism, it won't be alone. that other democracies will follow, that the entire post-World War II liberal order will collapse, that the 21st century will be defined not by the triumph of democracy, but by its failure, that historians in 2100 will look back at 2025 as the turning point when humanity chose a darker path. But the seer also wrote the alternative. He wrote that if America resists, if institutions hold, if citizens find courage, if truth prevails over propaganda, if justice triumphs over power, then 2025 could be remembered differently, as the year when democracy was tested and survived, as the year when Americans proved the founders' experiment could endure even the most severe stress test, as the year when the world learned that freedom isn't free but is worth fighting for. Two futures, both written, both possible. The choice is being made right now, in courtrooms where judges decide if presidents are above the law, in newsrooms where journalists decide if truth matters more than access, in military academies where officers decide if their oath is to the Constitution or to a man, in congressional chambers where representatives decide if country matters more than party, in living rooms where citizens decide if they'll speak up or stay silent. Nostradamus saw all these decision points. He saw the weight of history resting on shoulders that don't realize they carry it. He saw ordinary people making extraordinary choices, or failing to make them. He saw the consequences of both action and inaction, and he left his prophecies as a roadmap, not of what will happen, but of what could happen if we're not careful, if we don't learn from history, if we don't take warnings seriously. So what happens next? What unfolds in 2025? Will Trump successfully consolidate power? Will institutions resist? Will there be violence in the streets? Will democracy survive? Will America remain a beacon of freedom or become a cautionary tale? Nostradamus wrote all these possibilities. He saw them all, but he left the ending unwritten, because the ending depends on us, on our choices, our courage, our wisdom, our ability to see through propaganda and fear to the fundamental truths that the founders understood. That power must be divided, that no one is above the law, that tyranny often comes wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross, that those who would give up essential liberty for temporary security deserve neither, that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, that democracy requires participation, not just in voting, but in constant defense of its principles. The prophecies are written, the warnings are clear. The year 2025 approaches, and everything Nostradamus predicted is aligning with chilling precision. Trump returning to power, promising retribution, assembling loyalists, discussing emergency powers, threatening institutions, dividing the nation, all exactly as foretold 500 years ago. The question is no longer whether Nostradamus was right. The question is what we do with that knowledge, because here's the final prophecy. The one Nostradamus saved for last, the one that gives both hope and responsibility. He wrote that those who know the future have the power to change it. That awareness is the first step to prevention. That prophecies are warnings, not inevitabilities. That free will exists even within destiny. And that the people of 2025, if they choose, can write a different ending than the one he saw in his darkest visions. This message is for you. Now that you know the prophecies, you're part of them. Your understanding, your voice, your action or inaction all contribute to the final outcome. Nostradamus saw you. He saw millions knowing his prophecies in the critical year. He saw the power of distributed information. He saw that collective knowledge of dangers could be the difference between collapse and salvation. He saw you here now hearing these words. And he made you part of the solution, because the most powerful prophecies aren't the ones that inevitably come true. They're the ones that are known in time to be prevented. The warnings that change behavior, the visions that inspire vigilance, the predictions that unite people in common purpose to avoid a dark future. That's why Nostradamus wrote, not to doom us, but to save us, by showing us what could happen if we're not careful. If we don't pay attention, if we don't act, 2025 is here. The prophecies are unfolding. Trump is returning. The tests are coming. America stands at a crossroads. and the whole world watches to see which path it will choose. Democracy or authoritarianism, freedom or security, truth or power. The choice is being made now, and Nostradamus, from 500 years in the past, whispers a warning across the centuries. Listen, learn, act before it's too late. If this video moved you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who also needs to know this truth.